Hey, John.
Oh, Nick, there you are.
John,
The Blackhawks.
you're there.
I'm here. I'm here in Belton, South Carolina. Not quite
Wow.
in our new home, but in a dear friend's spare room. Spare room, as they say in Narnia. I am. We're well. Thank everyone for their prayers. Merry Christmas. I think it's the fourth day of Christmas as we record. Um, Seriously, it's been a marvelously straightforward move. Usual, bumps and speed bumps, whatever. But I spent this morning beginning to unload the pod at the house that we've been able to lease. Praise God, and we have church this afternoon and tomorrow morning. So mission accomplished on that level. Anyway, why are you wearing a Blackhawks jersey? Come on.
Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting you, John. So I thought I was going to have to be the American shock jock. So I got this my hockey jersey. I've been practicing. I've been practicing. I have opinions. I have opinions. If that's okay
Throw
with
those
you.
gloves off, Nick. Throw the gloves off. It's time. It's time to do battle. Yeah, that's great. That's great. High sticking, Nick. I love it. All right. Yeah, I didn't think there was much of a Blackhawks contingent in South Wales, but all right, that's good. I have been to one National Hockey League game in my life, and it was at Chicago Stadium. I was watching the Blackhawks, but they were playing the Detroit Red Wings, who should be the claimant on all of your affections.
It it
Um,
it really should. I think if it wasn't that my family adores National Lampoon, and this was worn in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, I think if I was going to lean towards an American sport, it would probably be baseball.
uh, yeah. I, yeah, American football has much less to do with the football you're used to than
Yeah.
American baseball does with cricket. I get it. All right. Um, though there is that thing about throwing a ball over 100 miles an hour, overhand. I mean, anyway. All right. All right. We've got this is the beginning of the new year.
Yeah.
I thank everyone, all the subscribers. Thanks for your patience with me as I moved my
Yeah.
family 1,000 miles east. But we're starting off with a real bang. Last year, right at the end of the year, Rowling gave us a charm bracelet, and you've done the marvelous exegete work on that, Nick. Singular, wonderfully well done. I have nothing to add to your exegesis, except you didn't talk that much about the Psalter piece, and I'm waiting on a dear friend of ours who
Yeah.
is also a close student of the Psalter to check in on what she thinks that might mean.
Yeah.
But I think it does have relevance to the conversation we're about to have. Uh, and Nick wrote to me. We had a conversation and said she's got a blood disease. Rowling's got a blood disease. Who knew? And Nick actually follows through all the replies
Yes.
and found out what the blood disease was, and we don't know. And the link down below. Nick did a weblog article just devoted to that. Rowling's revelation. And then he did something which none of you have seen. He did the full survey of the work using the various tools that we have courtesy of the Rowling Library. Necessary thank you to the Rowling Library and the Nick's facility with Kindle and other electronic copies of books. He's able to search for the word blood. And that he sent that to me, and I said, this is that magnificent work. It definitely is a golden thread, a blood red golden thread, but still, a golden thread. And Nick said, I'll write it up. And so he did. And if that's really the preliminaries to this conversation is Nick's weblog article and then Nick's Hogwarts Professor Substack piece called The Troubled Blood of J.K. Rowling. A fascinating essay. And so we're going to talk today about those three things:
Yes.
the actual tweet, the survey that demonstrates that it really is a golden thread, and that will be down below. I love copying and pasting other people's work as long as it's Nick's. It'll be down below. No link because it's just my inbox, and then Nick's essay and the bit of blood that Nick overlooks, which is why we're a team. I should, if you'd give me any warning, I would have gotten a Red
So, John,
Wings jersey, whatever.
but you're wearing a crimson jersey. I think that counts as appropriate for the show. But
It's
you're being very modest. So I remember listening to you more than 5 years ago. More than 5 years ago, there was a podcast, and a podcast I dearly miss is the old style reading, writing, rolling. It was you, Elizabeth Baird Hardy, and Beatrice Groves were talking about troubled blood and speculations of troubled blood, and you'd already done the count of the word of the word blood in the Harry Potter series.
again using a Rowling library tool. I had
Yeah.
not done a count page by page. That's as hard as typing in blood in a search engine. But anyway, I'd done it. That and thank you, Nick, for knowing my work better than I do. In that you were able to find that
Well,
key paragraph.
It stuck in my mind because you had an amazing phrase in that podcast. You said people think the theme of Harry Potter is love, and in your usual style, you said it's not. It's not. Harry Potter's all about blood.
And that's, as we'll discuss, that's largely true. And what's exciting? In the Marine Corps, they tell you, say what you're going to say it, and then tell them what you said. So I've already said, here's what we're going to say today. Let me say why I'm excited about this before we say it, what we're going to say. This is actually a Marine Corps thing, Nick. You think it's Christmas? Come on. The reason I'm excited about this is I think this may be the first time, that we've been able to have a revelation from Rowling's Lake. This is a clear biological issue. We don't know when it hit her, whether that was well on in her life, whether it was early in her life. I think it's safe to say it was before she started writing Harry Potter. And that her reflections on blood are profound because she's that kind of person.
Yeah.
And this is an aspect of her life that's very meaningful. That's led her to think about just blood issues. And that's actually why I'm wearing this thing, is because we're talking about blood today. And anyway, think of me as, A positive blood, because that's what I am. I'm an A plus. Just saying. No jokes there about American grading systems, but yeah, I am an A plus. Rowling's reflections on blood are multidimensional, and they're all remarkably powerful things, where she uses it and no one struggles to catch the meaning. When she talks about mud bloods and pure bloods, we get the whole caste relationships inside the United Kingdom, everything about class, which is so much a part of her worldview growing up in Church Cottage, looking up the hill at the manor. And, this is her reflections on that position and her father's ambitions to escape his, lower middle class status. And then there's just, blood as life. And these are things that you've concluded after going through her work and pulling these things out. And finally, there's the what I want to talk about, because you neglected to, and because it's really in my bailiwick, is the spiritual dimensions of blood and what she may have heard in that church community that met every Sunday next door to where she lived. That's reflected in Harry Potter, certainly, especially in Deathly Hallows, the conclusion. And here's the part that all the people who have read all these things that we've already talked about on this subject. I think Rowling's comments about the blood being no big deal, and her comments about the God-shaped vacuum within her, have been clues that she needed to drop, but which also are her patented first-tier misdirection. That the strike ending may be as phenomenally Christian as Deathly Hallows was. that's definitely been a shed element from the start, Nick.
Yeah.
So, and a golden thread, and yet we don't see that much of it in Strike. We may be leading up to it, however, and Rowling feels obliged to drop enough breadcrumbs so we don't feel cheated in the end. Though that bit about the God-shaped vacuum, that to me is, I think she got me. I think she really pushed me leaning like, I called her all sorts of names in the last podcast. I think, yeah, she's read those books. And all right, so let's first things first. Tell me about the
Okay.
tweet. Tell me about the tweet.
Right. Okay. So, and this may shock some of our listeners, but Rowling often interacts with members of the gender enthusiast community on a platform called X. It used to be Twitter. Debating what used to be very simple English language. So the debate is around what is a woman, what is male, what is female, how is that defined? And the usual definition among the gender critical community is it's all to do with reproduction, male and female, large gamete, small gamete. There's only one sex that is able to produce sperm. There's only one sex that's able to produce ovum. And the usual rejoinder is, aha, what about there's a woman who can't ovulate? Well, just because somebody has a disorder or their equipment is faulty doesn't stop them being their innate sex. Of course.
Or menopause. I mean,
or menopause, or being too young to, or they have some disorder which means they're never able to, doesn't stop them being woman just because there is a disorder or there is a fault. Aha, they say, you're calling women who can't ovulate faulty. It's really, it's playground stuff. It's pitiful, really. But so she comes back.
But wait a minute, calling Rowling a misogynist? I mean, it really, yeah. Nick, I think the expression in the United States is that takes stones. I mean, that really is.
Yeah. Stones, stupidity. Again, yeah. So, and Rowling has this wonderful ability, which I admire so much, of reacting to stupidity calmly. She doesn't always do it. She does overreact. But when she does do it, she does it masterfully. So she comes back with, and I imagine an exaggerated sigh before she says this. So she sighs, and then she says, I was born with a bleeding disorder. That doesn't make me a new variety of human. I don't feel less than people without it, but nor does my bleeding disorder mean an inability to clot should be considered an innate attribute of the human species. I inherited an unusual physical anomaly. Nature has made a mistake. And then she goes on to say, similarly, people with disorders of sexual development aren't a strange third sex or a hybrid. They are men and women with physical anomalies. All perfectly straightforward stuff. But it does indicate that J.K. Rowling has a bleeding disorder, which is interesting. And, I can't say that when I read it, I went, hooray, because, somebody I greatly admire has just said that she has an illness. And it can be quite a serious illness. So, further down in that Twitter thread, there was somebody who has von, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it, so I'm going to pronounce it as an Englishman would, which is probably wrong, von Willebrand disease, VWD. And she says, I have to carry a card so that if I'm involved in an accident, then emergency services know that, I can't clot as well as other people can. Rowling comes back and says, I also have to carry a card. It's usually in my other purse. It sounds typically Rowling. Now, so that's not Rowling has von Willebrand disease, but it strongly suggests that that is the disease that she has for two reasons. Firstly, when I first read von Willebrand disease in Troubled Blood, and it's a disease that I'd never heard of before, I just went, oh, JK's spoken to her husband, the doctor. Give me a name of a bleeding disorder, and she's used that in the book. Isn't it great to have an expert living with you? Because I assumed it was this rare thing that only doctors know about. Actually, it is the most common genetic bleeding disorder. So low single percentage people are affected by it. Much more common than haemophilia, which everyone knows about. So it seems more likely, and she's used it for a principal character in Troubled Blood. And if you have a bleeding disorder and you create a character with a bleeding disorder, likelihood is it's going to be the same bleeding disorder that you have. So I believe she has von Willebrand's disease.
Doesn't require that much research on her part.
No, that's right.
Though she does make his name is King Philip, which is Roy Phillips. Okay.
Yes, Roy Phipps.
Phipps.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's King Philip. I'm sorry. It's the Armada King. Okay, let's just go right to the allegory side of this. Anyway, King Philip, Roy Phipps, has a severe paralyzing case of VWD, and I think we can be reasonably confident that Rowling doesn't have it. But again, VWD, from just the Wikipedia type research I did into this, is a full spectrum disorder.
Yes. So it's and there's lots of different ways of splitting it. Most typically, it's categorized as either type 1, type 2, or type 3. If you have type 1 or type 2, you're likely only to have mild symptoms. And so you'll only need treatment if you get more serious bleeding or to help prevent bleeding. For example, before surgery, doctors have to know you've got it, and dental treatment as well. The dentist has to know that you have it so that they can prevent bleeding during the operations. Type 3 is more serious, and that is to the extent of haemophilia, which is a life-limiting disease. And Roy Phipps, of course, has got type 3. I think it's unlikely that Rowling has type 3 VWD. I think we would know about it, so we'd have more reports of hospitalization.
The only thing I'm curious about in this respect is if they bruise more easily, and if that puts one at risk of embolism, this kind of thing, because Rowling has had a response to the strangling incident in Porto.
Yes,
that is, she still has PTSD from that experience. And maybe it was the entire experience, but certainly the hands-on neck aspect of that incident as described, for someone with a bleeding disorder, that actually could be life-threatening, not in the sense of the person just strangling you to death, but that you would bruise, and this would cause, other damage. So again, this is something that we didn't know in the biography, and begins to throw light on certain things.
Yes.
Yes. Well, okay. So we've got that. Thank you, Nick, for that. For this again. In anything but the fourth generation of Harry Potter studies or Rowling studies, this would just have gone right down the street. And like, a footnote in the biography. But now that we're in the fourth generation of Rowling studies, and for those of you who don't know what that is, just a 30-second review here. The fourth generation of Rowling studies is the one that begins to incorporate elements from Rowling's biography to understanding her work, and her work as a whole, not just the latest work or the work that's on the horizon, but the 21 to 22 to 23, however you count them, books, screenplays, and script that she's written. Now this fourth generation work was really fostered by Rowling's description of her own writing method, that she's inspired by The Lake, which is her biographical substance, the books that she's read, the ideas that she has and holds dear to her, and those inner conflicts and unresolved issues that she has psychologically that give birth to these ideas for stories. And the lake gives her that. And she says she takes this molten glass inspiration from her metaphorical lake, and she walks up the hill. I always imagine there's a hill, and then she goes up the hill to the shed. And there at that elevated position, she uses her intentional artistry to turn that personal story into really a story with universal meaning or near universal meaning and substance. My whole career as a Rowling reader has been shed work until 2019, when she came out with the first Lake and Shed thing. I wrote my PhD thesis, which is called The Lake and the Shed, and started that work. At that point, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. All of a sudden, Nick Jeffrey walked into my life. And Nick actually understood the biographical stuff, which had absolutely, one, had been a matter of personal indifference to me that I really had tried to ignore, even when in cases like Casual Vacancy, where I wrote a piece saying, here's all that, this is Rowling writing about her own history, and that doesn't matter at all. Just put that aside. Nick, whose first book was Casual Vacancy, said, "Oh no, if you're from the West England or Eastern Wales, this is the stuff." And he was right. At least Rowling agreed with him. I like to think that sometimes Rowling is wrong even about her own work, but here, no. If you don't understand the lake, you're not going to understand really the artistry involved in the shed, how these things have been transformed. Now, again, that's the artistry and meaning aspect of this, is Lake and Shed. You've got to do this. Now, we've done work with this where, especially in the Conrecki, we had fun. We went through all the work, and we talked about every book in terms of a lake element and every book in terms of one shed element. And there's 7 shed hallmarks, pillars, and there's what did you come with, 10 springs, Nick?
Yes, we kept adding to them.
Yeah. So, well, now we got a new one. There were 10. There's now 11, right? And what we found was, after you look at these things, you begin to notice that there are what we've tagged golden threads, things that run through every single thing that she writes. And in the Conrecki thing, Nick, down below, we got to have threads to this one, the golden threads episodes of the Conrecki marathon. That, in those shows, we talked about, I think, 12 or 14 golden threads. We named, I think, 14 and went through 12. And those are things like Bad Dad and Divine Mother and, gosh, now, of course, certainly The Lost Child.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, we said, look, you can take this golden thread that we've noted, and now we have to ask the question, what inspired this? What has inspired this consistent golden thread? The most controversial aspect of that was certainly the idea that Rowling had an abortion before the Harry Potter, something to do with her relationship with Michael, and that's been an unresolved issue that appears in almost everything that she writes. That certainly was controversial, but then we took that tool and said, how can you read her? If that is the case, what does that mean? And showed that if you read the 7 Harry Potter novels in that light, you find out that there's something interior which is exteriorized and eliminated in every book, and it's a good thing. So in a way, it becomes an apologetic wrapped in Christian symbolism for induced abortion. Now that's still a controversial theory, and it was working from text to biography. Well, now, beginning of 2026, we get a new biographical element, and Nick, because Nick wasn't packing all of his belongings and shipping them across the country, giving away 7,000 LPs. Oh, and half of my books. Oh my goodness! All right. Anyway, you notice I'm only halfway here, Nick. My bottom half I left behind in Oklahoma. There's simply no bottom half to me. Nick went through the text, and do you want to go through that, Nick, or should we simply say it's down below if you want? I mean,
No,
Let's,
we can go through that because I think it also, at least to me, it's indicative of when I think this diagnosis may have occurred. So we've got Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The word blood appears 33 times. We have, of course, the usage of dragon's blood. We meet the Bloody Baron. There's only one reference of blood and heredity. So this is Harry thought Flint looked as if he had some troll blood in him. There's
that would be a fault, Nick. That would be a
yeah,
fault.
oh, that would be a fault. There's of course the unicorn blood, and the Philosopher's Stone itself is described as being a blood red stone. But we have a shift then when we come to Chamber of Secrets. So we go from 33 mentions of blood up to 46, and it's all heredity. So we've got a mention of not a drop of magical blood in their veins. Wizard blood is counting for less everywhere. No Malfoy's worth listening to. Bad blood, that's what it is. Nobody asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood. People who think that
It's fascinating that you mentioned Hagrid
yeah,
uses bad blood as
yeah,
I mean that's okay. That's a fascinating tell, isn't it? Even the good people talk about
yeah.
genetic influences.
We have the introduction of pure blood. We have the introduction of muggle blood, mud blood. It's all heredity from Chamber of Secrets. So my theory is Rowling gets this diagnosis somewhere pre-publication of Philosopher's Stone, but Philosopher's Stone is pretty much finished before she gets this diagnosis, which would put her into Edinburgh at some point.
I'm going to push back on that immediately, Nick, and say
Yeah.
no way, because the books are so carefully planned that she has, Deathly Hallows
Yes.
plotted before she finishes Philosopher's Stone. She has all these things sketched. So I'm going to push back and say probably pre-Porto on that blood diagnosis. And I'm suspicious because of the Arthur Weasley situation that it was from childhood, that and it's daddy's fault. Bad dad gave her this condition. But anyway, we'll get to that. Anyway, on to Prisoner, right?
Okay, so on to Prisoner. So 46 in Chamber of Secrets. She backs off a bit in Prisoner of Azkaban. So there's only 21 times. But again, there's lots of themes of heredity, and not just in the magical world. So it all comes down to blood. As I was saying the other day, bad blood will out. Now, I'm saying nothing against your family, Petunia. So again, this is all in the Muggle world. Ron and Hermione, when they're in Hogsmeade, examining a tray of blood-flavored lollipops. And we've got blood. Ron yelled into the stunned silence. He's gone, and you know what it was on the floor. So there's blood does appear. It's a little bit of heredity in Muggle as well as the magical worlds, but it's dropped off a bit until Goblet of Fire.
Well, that blood mention though you mentioned from Aunt Marge,
Yeah,
that's really critical. That frames
yes,
that whole book.
it does.
So yeah,
And
it drops in terms of frequency, but
that's essentially class, which we know is another golden thread within the works of J.K. Rowling. So she's certainly melded that blood disorder and class themes together. Goblet of Fire, we're back up to 37. The Durmstrang students were revealed to be wearing robes of a deep blood red. We've got that perversion of the Eucharist in the graveyard, blood of the enemy forcibly taken. and the reason why he's taken it. So I wanted Harry Potter's blood. I wanted the blood of the one who had stripped me of power 13 years ago, for the lingering protection his mother once gave him would then reside in my veins too. Okay. Goblet of Fire. After that, we get Order of the Phoenix, and it jumps. So we get 85 mentions of blood in Phoenix.
I'm gonna push back right away on that, Nick, because
Okay.
you're talking about just straight quantity of mentions
Yes.
and not controlling for number of pages in the books.
No, that's
So
true.
85 Order of the Phoenix is probably not nearly as many mentions per page as any of the first three books.
Certainly not. No, not the first three. Goblet of Fire is still a fairly hefty tome, and that's got less than half the mentions of Phoenix.
A big jump.
Yeah.
But I still think Philosopher's Stone, you said 36?
So Stone was 33.
33.
Chamber
Okay.
Chamber
Okay.
46. So Chamber's blood heavy.
I bet there's more mentions per page in Philosopher's Stone than in any other book. Just my guess, because Order of the Phoenix, I think, is 2 or 3 times the length of Philosopher's Stone.
Yes.
Um,
when I do that calculation, my money's still, I think, going to be on Chamber of Secrets.
Okay.
Okay. So Order of the Phoenix. She howled, her eyes popping at the sight of the man. Blood traitor, abomination, shame of my flesh. That honestly, that family, even in painting form, is simply delightful. And then Black himself says, because I hated the whole lot of them. My parents, with their pure blood mania, convinced that to be a Black made you practically royal. So again, a little bit like Chamber of Secrets, it's all heritability. The pure blood families are all interrelated, said Sirius. If you're only going to let your sons and daughters marry pure bloods, your choice is very limited. There are hardly any of us left. Even the ghost. So Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington says, terrified, I hope I, Nicholas Sir Mimsy Porpington, have never been guilty of cowardice in my life. The noble blood that runs in my veins. Very, very Harry Five. Again and again, Harry wrote this. This was the blood quill. Again and again, Harry wrote the words on the parchment in what soon came to realize was not ink but his own blood. Then we get Arthur's injury. It seems there was some rather unusual kind of poison in that snake's fangs that keeps wounds open. They'll find an antidote, though. They say they've had much worse cases than mine. And in the meantime, I just have to keep taking the blood replenishing potion every hour.
And that you've pointed out to me, Nick, in private conversation, that's a real tell, that Nagini's bite, the serpent's bite, not only because of its Christian content. It's pretty early in the book, right? I mean, it's the serpent that it's death curse, but it has a bite whose poison is specifically VWD, that it causes. You can't clot, you can't close this wound, and then it bites the father.
Yes,
I'm just the only father who survives in the books, really, and that I think is maybe Rowling's payback. She couldn't quite kill Arthur Weasley like she wanted to. But she got him with the VWD that he had passed on to her, right? Anyway, go on.
Yes.
Lake jokes.
I mean, it's fun to speculate, but honestly, if both of her parents were asymptomatic, she might not ever know unless she got her parents genetically tested. And what would be the point if they were no longer having kids? There'd be no point to have the genetic test. And then, of course, we get the so-called protection of Privet Drive. While you can still call home the place where your mother's blood dwells, There you cannot be touched or harmed by Voldemort. He shed her blood, but it lives on in you and her sister. Her blood becomes your refuge.
I've written about this at some length, but that's the
Yeah.
really the anyway, we'll get back to that.
So now we start accelerating. So 85 times in Phoenix, we move on to Half-Blood Prince, and it's 105. There's blood in the title, John. And just to be clear, in my electronic copy, of course, it's got the title of the book above every page. I'm not counting that as having blood in the book. Okay, so we have if I had murdered Harry Potter, the Dark Lord could not have used his blood to regenerate. So let's call back to the previous book. Harry never hated Malfoy more than as he lay there, like an absurd turtle on his back, blood dripping sickeningly into his open mouth. Of course, the later books, it gets more graphic. They are more adult books. But we get, and I still remember reading that.
It's on the train, right? That's not the bathroom.
No, that's on the train. So that's Harry's blood. That's not Malfoy's blood. My daughter, pure-blooded descendant of Salazar Slytherin, hankering after a filthy, dirt-veined muggle. It was as though something large and scaly erupted into life in Harry's stomach, clawing at his insides. Hot blood seemed to flood his brain. Hey, puberty. I've learned more from the Half-Blood Prince than Snape or Slughorn have taught me. Again, I am counting, so all of those mentions in the book to the Half-Blood Prince, I'm counting that as a blood reference. Harry, I'd like you to meet Eldred Warple, an old student of mine, author of Blood Brothers, My Life Among the Vampires. And of course, his friend Sanguini. Yes, we get the comical vampire.
His name in Italian is Bloody.
Is Bloody. But I mean, Sanguini was just there to try and scotch all the rumors that Snape was a vampire, which he clearly was.
Thank you, Nick.
Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. He staggered backwards and collapsed onto the waterlogged floor with a great splash, his wand falling from his limp right hand. That's the Sectum Sempra.
Now, Nick, I just want to immediately say, I haven't been responding to comments, and there have been such a flood of great comments in the last week or two while I've been on the road saying, Anyway, I just want to note that Ed's been talking about this since I think the weblog piece about the Twitter thing was, how about Sectum Sempra? Because she has her hero use essentially a VWD curse that she's just going to always be cutting and bleeding. And only Snape knows the cure for that, which should have been our real cue that Snape is a good guy if we had known she had this bleeding disease. Anyway, forget the other person, the card in it. You've got Severus Snape on hand to just start, sewing you up, musically, no less. Anyway, that's a great catch, Ed. Just wanted to say that.
And then of course the last big reference, I think, is the hiding place in the cave. So there's a payment, has to give a payment. Payment, said Harry. You've got to give the door something. Yes, said Dumbledore. Blood, if I'm not much mistaken. So that is
crude magic.
Crude, yeah. Then we move on to the big denouement. So we have Deathly Hallows.
I want to add there about that. That you had to make that donation.
Yeah.
And Dumbledore's being kind of dismissive. Oh, you got to use blood.
Yeah.
That's not. I mean, you can say it's crude, but it's to say that blood has certain mysterious properties.
Yes.
And that one is giving up blood voluntarily is to require some kind of sacrifice, personal sacrifice. And an identification sacrifice. Talk about leaving a fingerprint. You're going to put your blood on the wall. I mean, that there's more to that. And certainly we wouldn't have been moved to reflect more on that until we find out that Rowling has a bleeding disorder and wouldn't willfully cut herself to put a mark on the wall.
Yeah.
All right. Excuse me.
So we have Deathly Hallows. Jumps again 125 times. Blood is mentioned. We have nice callbacks to previous blood mentions. So we have in the biography of Dumbledore, as I reveal in chapter 16, Ivor Dillonsby claims he had already discovered 8 uses of dragon's blood when Dumbledore borrowed his papers. We have the work of the now Dark Ministry, their publications, Mudbloods and the Dangers They Pose to a Peaceful Pure Blood Society. Splinched, said Hermione, her fingers already busy at Ron's sleeve where the blood was wettest and darkest. Was it his own blood pulsing through his veins that he could feel, or was something beating inside the locket like a tiny metal heart? Drop your wands, she whispered. Drop them or we'll see exactly how filthy her blood is. Oh, Bellatrix is wonderful. We have
That's
Voldemort.
Bloody wonderful, Nick.
Bloody wonderful. So we have Voldemort again. Every drop of magical blood spilled is a loss and a waste. And then we have at King's Cross, precisely, said Dumbledore. He took your blood and rebuilt his living body with it. Your blood in his veins, Harry. Lily's protection both inside both of you. He tethered you to life while he lives. So, again, they're right at the end. It all comes down to blood.
How many times does she use the word bloody as in by Our Lady, that United Kingdom curse?
So hardly at all in Harry Potter. Much more common in the films, and I don't have the scripts to do that check. But yeah,
not her usage. Okay.
No. As we will discover, very different in Cormoran Strike. It is one of the favourite curses when they're not choosing something a bit stronger. Fantastic Beasts, the school library book, not the film, has blood 11 times. So we've got various creatures that are attracted to it. So there's the Kappa, feeds on human blood, but may be persuaded not to harm a person if it is thrown a cucumber with that person's name carved into it. Always carry one with you, John. John's a nice simple name to carve into it. Re-em blood gives the drinker immense strength, though the difficulty in procuring it means that supplies are negligible. Salamander blood has powerful curative and restorative properties. Quidditch through the ages, the word blood appears 6 times. Bludgers, of course, were the word evolved from blooders, and they were flying rocks, essentially, in the early forms of the game. Tales of Beedle the Bard, the word blood appears 5 times. And again, more frequently actually in Dumbledore's explanatory passages rather than the books themselves. So he mentions heredity there. There is not a witch or wizard in existence whose blood has not mingled with that of the Muggles. Okay, Casual Vacancy. It appears 97 times.
Whoa!
Yeah. Again, we have no magic, but lots of the curse word. So, of course, at Barry's when he's having this attack right at the beginning, then pain such as he had never experienced sliced through his brain like a demolition ball. He barely noticed the smarting of his knees as they smacked into the cold tarmac. His skull was awash with fire and blood. The agony was excruciating beyond endurance, except that endure he must, for oblivion was still a minute away. Oh, honestly, how you get past that first chapter, but it's worth it. It really is worth it. We have the fields, the bloody, bloody fields. Um, some medical uses as well. So Miss Whedon's new pills are upsetting her stomach, said Paminda calmly. So we're doing your bloods today, aren't we? So bloods there is a reference to a blood test. Pain, hot pain, and the blood came at once when she had cut herself right up to her elbow. She pressed the wad of tissues onto the long wound, making sure that nothing leaked onto her nightshirt or cup, of course. But Parminder's awful, awful cutting episodes.
This is great. This is like name that tune. You start the quote. And I'm like, who is this?
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah,
recognize.
yeah,
It's exciting.
yeah. And of course, we got a reference to diabetes as well. So that morning at breakfast, she had tested her blood sugar with the glucometer for the first time, then taken out the pre-filled needle and inserted it into her own belly. It had hurt much more when the deft Parminder did it. Um,
It hurt far more or far less?
it had hurt much more than when the deft Parminder did it. Did she find it easier to accept him as a separate individual than if he had been made from her flesh and blood, her glucose heavy, tainted blood? I think that's probably the clearest reference to maybe a lake inspiration in there. Okay, then we come on to Cormoran's Strike. So Cuckoo's Calling, the word blood appears 64 times. Again, there's an awful lot of references to the curse word. Sorry, so some of these quotes just give me a smile when I just read the first couple of lines because I can remember them coming. Her accidental assailant was massive. His height, his general hairiness, coupled with a gently expanding belly, suggested a grizzly bear. One of his eyes was puffy and bruised, the skin just below the eyebrow cut. Congealing blood sat in a raised white-edged nail tracks on his left cheek and the right side of his thick neck, revealed by the crumpled open collar of his shirt. So that's really the first explosive meeting of Strike and Robin.
And it's fascinating to me. I don't know how many times the word congealing appears inside the books, but it's the first one that you've mentioned in your greatest
Yeah.
hits collection here. That the first meeting of Robin and Strike, his blood is congealing, which
Yes.
is exactly what the disorder is about.
Yeah.
Okay, just saying. Just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. Well, maybe for Rowling that's notable because she doesn't see a lot of congealing blood.
Or she worries
Okay.
about it.
Well, yeah.
Where's that
Um,
purse? Where's that purse?
Then we have perhaps a knife would plunge between his shoulder blades as he walked through the front doors of her flat. Perhaps he would walk into a bedroom to discover her corpse, wrists slit, lying in a puddle of congealing blood in front of the fireplace. Second congealing. Um, Pushing someone over a balcony is a spur of the moment thing, said Strike, as though he had felt her inner wince. Hot blood, blind temper. And then we get, I think, our first mention of heredity. When Lucy's lips were pursed, she bore a strong resemblance to their Aunt Joan, who was no blood relation to either of them. You're a cold-blooded bastard, aren't you? No fucking wonder old Johnny's not keen on you. Then, see, I'm
Seriously,
very,
if he doesn't
very,
come back in the last two books, it is a
yeah.
great loss to English literature if he does not come back.
I've just realised very prudishly I haven't chosen any of them the uses of bloody as a curse word, and then I've just recorded the word fucking. Sorry, family. Um, Strike, however, knew Charlotte as intimately as a germ that had lingered in his blood for 15 years. And then a memory, Sergeant Gary Topley, lying in the blood-spattered dust of that Afghanistan road, his face unscathed, but with no body below the upper ribs. So, so a fairly mild introduction, I would say, to the Cormoran Strike series. But again, we get an acceleration with the silkworm. So it's moved up to 140 mentions of the word blood.
What percentage of those do you think is the curse? Is the
vast majority for both the first two books. So as an example, I have chosen one of them as a curse. Message after message stuck out on the bloody cliffs at Gwythian trying to get reception. I laugh. Gwythian is literally 5 miles away from where my grandfather used to farm in Cornwall. Strike had never taken the time to consider, although Polwarth, a man of many pithy theories, took the view that such women, nervy, overbred, were subconsciously looking for what he called cart horse blood. Now, this is a key. It's a key phrase. Again, blood and heredity, and it's nervy, overbred women attracted to Strike's cart horse blood.
You say this is like the pit pony.
Yeah.
We would call, I think what he's referring to as cart horse, we would call Clydesdales in the United States.
Yeah. So a Clydesdale is a breed of draft horse. So that is a horse that is bred for pulling. There's also in England what we would call a Shire horse. So a Shire horse is a massive cold-blooded draft animal. But most farms would have a draft animal nothing like as massive as either a Clydesdale or a Shire. Essentially, those two horses, the Clydesdales and the Shires, they are descended from what were in medieval times the war horse. So they're designed, the massive horses designed to support a heavily armored knight, and so was perfectly suited for pulling what we call drays, which are the precursors to lorries, massive wagons with very heavy cargoes. Most farms would have a draft animal, which would be around about the size of a normal riding horse, just a little bit stockier. And they would be a farm horse or a cart horse, so a horse that is designed for pulling.
So when you say cart horse, it isn't a reference to these enormous horses.
No, and also not so very carefully bred. So both Shire horses and Clydesdales are very carefully bred to maintain the breed. Actually, a common or garden cart horse, again, is would not be very carefully bred. You wouldn't have a pedigree record
so
of its sires.
It's almost like like Strike. It's a mutt that happened to be very large. All right, I get it. Okay.
And so we have, and she says he won't let them sell. There was bad blood between Fancourt and Quine. Strike would have advised any friend to leave and not look back, but he had come to see her like a virus in his blood, and he doubted he would ever eradicate. So again, that recurs. Yeah,
that recurs. What, in each book, the virus in his blood piece?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much.
Even in the latest books, he's been denying that it has that effect. Yeah. that it's such a commonplace in his head that he's no, that's over. Anyway.
And then we have Robin's mother, and probably the bit that most made me love her. I know there's people have lost patience with Robin's mother, but here she is watching Michael Fancourt on television. So much for love being a mirage and a chimera, sighed Mrs. Ellicott as she tossed down her pen. This is no good. I wanted blood and guts, Michael. Blood and guts. So I think we can play a game of higher and lower. Silkworm, and it appears 140 times. We move on to Career of Evil. John, do we think more or less mentions of blood?
More.
Or less? 115 times only in Career of Evil.
I'm sorry. My copy of Career of Evil is blood soaked. So forgive me.
I think the discrepancy is down to that curse word, so that it's bloody is used, I think, less often in Career of Evil. But yes, plenty of mention. So he had not managed to scrub off all her blood. A dark line, like a parenthesis, lay under the middle fingernail of his left hand. And then he tastes it. Off those chapters, John. I still struggle to read through them.
Parallel with the popsicle, though. Just saying.
Yeah.
A popsicle, lollipop.
He was good at reading people. He had read and charmed the girl who had died yesterday among the blood-soaked peach towels. He doesn't like talking about personal stuff. Blood out of a stone. A high metal table. On a high metal table sat a pillow and a plastic evidence bag. It was covered in dark brown bloodstains. A cardboard box next to it contained bottles of spirits. Where there was bloodshed, there was always alcohol. Strike remembered the wide patch of blood on the sheets, the excoriated skin on her wrist where Rona had tried to free herself. Nevertheless, those long hours of driving through the darkness, when he had known an encounter with the police might be fatal, when he had feared a request to turn out his pockets, or a shrewd-eyed passenger noticing dried blood on him, had taught him a powerful lesson. He was wearing a yellow t-shirt, and on his right forearm was the rose tattoo, which had undergone a modification. A dagger now ran through it, and drops of blood fell out of the flower towards the wrist. And then we have, if they'd been 5 minutes later, she'd have been a goner. It took 2 blood transfusions to keep her alive. Okay, so Career of Evil.
I think I can be excused for thinking that was a more bloody book.
I think, yeah. So maybe fewer times, but each one much more vivid, gory. Lethal Whites, we have an increase, so it's back up to 143 times now.
I assume most of that is the cursing, because there wasn't that much blood in Lethal White, was there?
There's cursing. There's also some mentions of heredity. But he had been left with a deep dislike of being driven by anybody else, and to this day, with dreams of blood and agony that sometimes woke him bathed in sweat. He could imagine Raphael bloody at the steering wheel, and the broken figure of the young mother on the road, and the police cars and the incident tape and the gawpers in passing cars. Last night when he was stoned, he said he knew a government minister who had blood on his hands. Would you mind waiting outside the curtain? We need to take bloods, change his drips and his catheter. Strike could taste blood, but from what he could see, the splintered and torn remnants of Jimmy's placard had been scattered in the melee. There was a piece of thick cream writing paper headed with a red Tudor rose like a drop of blood, and the printed address of the house in which Robin stood. The old knife wound on her arm had been gaping open, and it was the trail of her spurting blood that the pursuers were following, and she knew she would never make it to the place where Strike was waiting for the bag of bugs.
There is some blood.
There is some blood. She come to the yard, seen what had happened, ran towards Mr. Chisel, grabbed the hammer and just swung for him. blood everywhere. It was horrible. Okay, so 143 times in Lethal White. Now we move on to Troubled Blood. Absolutely no surprises. We get a massive score of 171 mentions.
Now it is significantly longer than like Order of the
It is.
Phoenix.
Yeah. Yeah, it
I
is
again,
longer.
I have to get a page thing, but again, with Cormoran Strike, you're going to have to factor in the curse word,
Yeah.
which I think is a throwaway, and the then mentions per page,
Mm.
but still, it's in the title.
Yes. And we get some good references as well. So we get, again, Heredity. So this is Polwarth right at the beginning. Yeah, well, Blood and Soil's never been my Strike talking to Polwarth. She'd heard stories that Ilsa gave titles like cheap thrillers. The Night of the Bread Knife, The Incident of the Black Lace Dress, and The Blood-Stained Note. I'd read some of those.
That's right. Well, it's also interesting because that thing about blood and soil that Strike drops on Polwarth, by the end of the book, he's singing the Song of the Western Man. So, I mean, it's...
She believed, I think, like Saharawadi, that bloodshed and disorder are not necessarily evil in themselves if resorted to for a noble cause. Even in the 70s, before DNA testing, the police did pretty well with fingerprints, blood groups, and so forth. Anyway, one of those things she told Lawson was that she'd sponged blood off the spare room carpet the day Margot disappeared. According to Roy,
is that the first mention of menstrual blood in these books?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And
it's
of
a
course,
curious thing.
We don't find that out actually until well into the book what that blood stain was. According to Roy, the age difference and the blood relationship ought to have constituted a total prohibition on the relationship in the minds of all decent people. But as we know, he managed to overcome those qualms 7 years later. In the second week of November, Joan's chemotherapy caused her white blood cell count to plummet dangerously, and she was admitted to hospital. She'd only once in her life had to face the possibility that she might be pregnant, and could still remember the relief that had flooded her when it became clear she wasn't, and wouldn't have to face still more contact with strangers and another intimate procedure, more blood, more pain. But there was something bloodless about the man. Not wet exactly, Una gave a sudden laugh. Bloodless. You'll know about his bleeding problem. The demon he saw was carrying a cup of blood and a sword. She never seemed to remember that I couldn't protect her, couldn't do anything. If somebody tried to hurt, because I'm a useless bleeder, useless bloody bleeder.
One of the weirdest expressions, yeah.
But doesn't that strike much more powerfully now we know what we know? I'm a useless bloody bleeder.
Especially because of the Phipps feeling that he could be a provider, but not a protector.
Yes.
This is largely a masculine role. Now, Rowling, I think this backdrop, the lake backdrop to the whole Strike series is the bizarre relationship she has with her husband, who's an extraordinary man. And that they clearly have worked through issues of the fact that she's, that he's always going to be Mr. J.K. Rowling. Yeah. That's, here she puts the disease on the man to show, his frustration in not being the protector when her husband clearly is not the provider in the family.
Yeah.
And so this has all sorts of things now that we know about the blood disease and that sort of thing. Anyway, just John's interjecting speculation there, Nick. Arbitrary shock jock speculation. Is that controversial to say that Rowling she and her husband had to have had issues about, especially after Christmas Pig, Christmas Pig. I mean, it's just...
I don't know. I think of course Rowling, like many people of her generation, like me, grew up in a traditional family where the father was the provider and went out to work, and the mom was a stay-at-home mom and looked after the children. But I think Rowling's own relationships haven't worked out that way, but I think that's true for many people nowadays. So with Michael, she had a full-time job. With the Portuguese fella, I can't see him being a reliable partner, even if she was sort of staying at home. He's not so much a protector and a provider. Everything
did she keep her job after she was married?
We don't know.
Or she continued?
Yeah, we don't know. We have no reliable information about that. We know he worked in TV. We know his career wasn't very long, but we can't really say if he was working during the relationship with Jo or not. We don't know.
They were living at his mother's house, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So on to Ink Black Heart. So the word blood appears 214 times. So yes, it's accelerating, John. There was bad blood between Strike and Mitch Patterson, the boss of the agency in question, which dated back to the time Patterson had put Strike himself under surveillance. Having explained the Christian symbolism of the pelican, which was feeding her chicks with her own blood, Groomer wondered aloud whether Legs was ready for a coffee. Second letter of the alphabet, eighth letter, BH, stands for Blood and Honor. Blood and Honor are a neo-Nazi skinhead group. Violet Patura, this is in text. I fucking love a redhead, proper Viking blood. Strike parked, then used the old man's handkerchief and his own saliva to remove from his face all traces of blood, of which there was been a surprising amount. This was his raptor wound. Red Souls lay where he'd been deposited on the platform, blood trickling from his inner ear. They thought there was a vampire in the real cemetery in the 70s. Eddie thought it was corny having a vampire, but I drew him so she could see what I was thinking. I wanted him to be inept, like trying to kill tourists, but never getting enough blood to live on. So he was like weak and feeble. Julius Evola, far-right philosopher, ludicrous racial theories, a rather determinedly eccentric classmate of mine at Radley was partial to him. Used to carry the myth of the blood around and read it ostentatiously at mealtimes.
The black sheep perennialist.
Yeah.
That Rowling highlighted. That was great.
And then, of course, we get the bloodbath at the house. Robin stamped hard on his bare foot before both slipped in another puddle of Indigo's blood. As the door shuddered, Robin saw, by the dim glow from a skylight, Katya slumped on the floor beside the bath, blood all over the hand she was pressing against her stomach. So 214 in Ink Black Heart. We have a very, very slight reduction in the running grave, down to only 194 mentions. It's important to say that my mother I was raised to call her Louise because the UHC forbids naming blood relationships. Isn't stupid. It'll have been used for chopping wood, but Oyson was convinced it had blood on it. We couldn't get it out, though. We couldn't reach. I don't know what's normal for a birth, but she seemed to lose a huge amount of blood. I was present when the baby was actually born because one of the birthing team couldn't cope anymore and I volunteered to take her place. Strike's imagination insisted on showing him a vivid picture of Charlotte submerged in her own blood, her black hair floating on the clotted surface.
We get that image, repeatedly
Oh,
in the
yeah.
latest book too. Yeah.
There was a puddle of blood seeping from under one of the toilet cubicle doors. She could see Lynn's blood-stained legs, which weren't moving. They committed 9 murders in all, one of them of a pregnant actress. And those young women were right in the thick of the action, ignoring the victim's pleas for mercies, dipping their fingers in the victim's blood to scrawl. Jesus, said Strike with a startled laugh as he remembered a detail he'd forgotten. They wrote pigs on the wall as well, in blood. That was the Manson family,
Yeah.
obviously. Okay, so less than 200 in the running grave. We're back to, I think, the most of any book in Hallmark Man. The word blood appears 246 times. Some might have considered her flat tone insensitive given Charlotte's recent death in the blood-filled bathtub, but as Strike was more than happy to dispense with prurient questions or faux sympathy. The body was blood group A positive. That's the same. So that blood group was one of the few things that we know about the body in the vault. It could easily have been John. So you going dark over Christmas had people worried, but you're back. You're not the body in the vault.
In the blood red shirt. Here we are.
Yeah, and vertically challenged. The splash patterns from blood were unfakeable according to forensics. There was also a partial footprint that had clearly been made while the blood was still liquid. The back wall broke the monotony of the sea of silver because it displayed many antique aprons and sashes embroidered in gold, and Robin's eyes lingered on an apron embroidered with a bloody severed head held up by a single hand. Yeah, something like, and he dropped his doob tube. Remember, Daz? And he told you it was a fucking blood sample, like you was gonna nick it off him. By the way, if members of Bronte Production are watching this and are interested in a character actor, I'm free for filming. Yeah. Previously a Conservative MP, he now headed various charitable and political organisations and committees, was ever ready with a quote for the papers, sprinkled his conversations with Latin tags, and capitalised to the full on the English public's weakness for a toff who seemed ready to laugh at himself. Having a fondness for appearing on political quiz shows, where he played to the hilt the part of genial, bumbling blue blood. Boris Johnson.
In case you missed that.
Blood must have started pooling in the lower part of the body before they started to mutilate it. Maybe that was deliberate. Maybe they didn't want blood seeping out under the vault door. As Strike watched, life and blood started to drain from the brindle, its legs twitching ever more feebly as blood flooded from its jugular. Ah.
Forgot about the dogfights.
Right. Oh, yeah. Robin took the turn into the road at speed, then looked sideways at Strike, one of whose hands was pressed to his inner thigh, blood seeping through his fingers. The bodies of Jim Todd and a woman Strike assumed to be his mother Nancy were lying on the dirty carpet in a foul miasma, encouraged by the gas fire that was continued to blaze. Todd, who was fully dressed, had been stabbed multiple times. His now black blood had soaked his shirt and the floor beneath him. And then, of course, we get the pitiful state of Strike at the fight scene. Blood now gushed from his head wound. Strike succeeded in grabbing the wrist of Griffith's knife-holding hand, then slammed it down onto the rough concrete floor. He could feel a weird coldness, as though flesh that had never been exposed to fresh air was meeting it for the first time, and this contrasted unpleasantly with the continuing flow of warm blood. Possibly combining heavy blood loss and neat whiskey hadn't been the very best idea. Strike was prepared to concede that now, but he had to keep talking because he wanted the man to know he knew. Oof. Okay. Do you want to look at the kids' books now, John?
You know, we're well into this. And why don't you include the Christmas pig items and down below? And
yeah, so there's the kids books. There's not a lot in the kids books, obviously. There's I've done the three Fantastic Beasts screenplay and Cursed Child as well. The one key one, I think, key one is A Cursed Child, which Rowling didn't write. But both Cursed Child and Secrets of Dumbledore contain this idea of a blood maledictus. Or a blood maledictus is a genetic, that is an inherited blood disorder. They call it a blood curse. And this description is given by Draco of his wife. We were capable of having children, but Astoria was frail. A blood malediction, serious one. An ancestor was cursed, and it showed up in her. You know how these things can resurface after generations? And again, so this is a stretch, all right, John? And I always say this when we're getting something from text that we don't know in life, but this is a double stretch because I'm getting it from a text that Rowling didn't even write. Okay. But so you asked earlier, was it from the mother? Was it from the father? Well, you can carry the genes of VWD and pass it on to your children. You have a 50% chance if one parent has this defective gene, you have a 50% chance of each child getting the defective gene. But so that 2 in 4 chance, only half of them will develop the condition. So you get a 25% chance of inheriting the condition and a defective gene, and a 25% chance of inheriting the defective gene but not developing the condition. So if one of her parents had the defective gene, it's 50-50 chance whether they had a condition or not. If they didn't have the condition, they wouldn't know that they had the gene. And here they're talking about how it can resurface after generations. So maybe if they looked back, there was a grandparent or a great grandparent who had the disease, and then it apparently disappeared because their children had the defective gene, but it didn't show up, and then it shows up in Rowling. Okay, so that's a lot of blood, John.
And you've been talking as we went along. You know that she uses this in different ways, but she uses it consistently in those ways.
Yes.
What groups did you get? And this is what you wrote up in your Substack piece.
Yes.
What groups did you get for that usage?
So there's blood as heritage, and we get that in essentially everything that she writes. So of course, it's most obvious because it's laid out in black and white in Chamber of Secrets. Is the idea of magical blood and Muggle blood, and the half blood and the mud bloods and pure bloods and all the different ways of describing this. We get it, of course, in the strike books, with the rather than pure blood, they're referred to as blue bloods or pedigree blood, and we get the cart horse blood. So this is basically using blood as another way of talking about class. If we're going to talk about class, we've got to talk about casual vacancy. Now we have the fields, where again it's considered the underclass. It's where they talk about blood as inheritance. And then, of course, there's literal blood. So we get literal blood again in all of the books that she writes. But blood is a result of violence, as blood is a result of accident. What am I missing, John?
You've done caste and class. You've done inheritance.
Yeah.
You've done literal blood, and obviously in a murder mystery series, that's going to be a lot. We see the blood as a curse. I wanted to talk about that because it's a curious curse. You know, if you use the F-bomb, you know, it's touching on a taboo about sexual intercourse being, you know, just brought up in your face, and something which is the greatest intimacy and vulnerability, and just splayed out in public as that. And that's meant to disturb you. It's an estrangement, you know, I think. And if you say the same thing with the talking about, you know, again, the S word is simply because excrement is considered to be a taboo thing. You just don't, you know, fling it around unless you're a, you know, chimpanzee at the zoo. And that again all makes sense. But bloody isn't a reference to literally, you know, the stuff in your veins and your arteries. And correct me if I'm wrong here. This is just, I don't know where I first learned this or heard this, but it's actually a Catholic curse. As Irish as anything, you know. There was until well after the magisterial Reformation, there was devotion to the Mother of God in the English church as well. And to say by Our Lady, which becomes bloody, was again absolutely taboo. It was it was sort of like, you know, God's wrath and this kind of thing, you know, gadzooks. But this a peculiar curse for Rowling to lean on as heavily as she does. I'd love to see a thing with a comparison between bloody and the F word, the F-bomb, and to see which one she uses more in the books. If it's bloody, and I suspect it is, then that's an odd choice, because even as a remnant of English historical religious observance and sensitivities, first let's say I don't know. Is it that much a commonplace in the United Kingdom to drop bloody as a?
Yeah, no, it really is, and it's considered a much milder form of curse than the F word, or even the S word.
Showing once again the religious indifference in the United Kingdom.
Yeah,
it's just embrace that impiety.
I think I curse rarely, but certainly using the term bloody wouldn't register with me as somebody was being offensive, or I don't think it would really strike me as, well, somebody's just used a curse word at me.
When you were growing up, was it a commonplace on the BBC? Was it Even entertainment. I mean, how has that progressed?
So it's certainly progressed. I don't think on the BBC we would have heard it when I was growing up before The Watershed, and unless it was a drama, and even then I think it would have to be on after 9 p.m. Um,
This is the
Now,
transition of this generation, really, that's just
yeah,
become. I mean, until I was in the Marine Corps, the F word was, um, you know, you were demonstrating that you were distraught, furious, certainly demanding attention to what you were saying, and it
yeah,
was a word that generated an emotional response. In the Marine Corps, it was an adverb. It was punctuation. It was an
yeah,
adjective, a noun. It was, I mean, wow, it's just everywhere. I heard a man, a sergeant once in MCT. All the Marines will nod their head about this. He's saying, pulling us aside to call us out for something, and he used the F word in all its variants, 70 or 80 times in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes. I was just it was a virtuoso performance, really, of and that of course immunizes you to its effect. Just
yeah,
you know, and it really had an effect on us because we just come out of boot camp, and in boot camp they weren't allowed to swear. They didn't curse. They used all sorts of variants on cursing, but they didn't use those words. So here's this guy just fire hosing us in the F bomb. Now that um, so much for the idea that Rowling was using it um, as an emphasis. It's that she's just speaking as characters would speak in the
yes, I
United
think so.
Kingdom.
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
so.
Um, it's interesting. Does strike use the word?
Yes.
Okay. Um, it's funny. I just don't recall it. It's funny. I blocked that out. Doesn't make any impression on me at all. Now it will, of course. Now we're having this conversation. But the big thing that it's just something you said. There was the description of the Manson family, and
Yeah,
Stryker's reading about the atrocities of the massacre in California. That I don't think Manson was even present. I think his underlings commit that murder. Um, Strike's response to that is to say Jesus. Now I mean that kind of um, response. Um, Strike uses do a Rolling Library search on the word Jesus because he uses that word, usually in very important moments. For example, that's what he yelled at Robin when he almost knocked her off the stairs at the very beginning. That's the first thing he says as he's hurtling towards her. That is congealing blood. Uh, Rowling has said that she attended church as a very young woman, either comprehensive age or earlier, and she liked what she heard there. Now, this had to have been in the early 70s or maybe late 70s, but I mean in the 70s. And as unfortunately compromised as the Anglican Communion is theologically of late, uh, at that point, the visiting priests in that, because it wasn't a regular parish, right? It had a
yeah,
priest that came in on a circuit of some kind. He almost certainly kept it to the confession of the Anglican Church, which at that point, and I think this is still in their paperwork, if not in their regular confession, that the blood offered at the altar, the Eucharistic sacrifice, is the body and blood of Christ.
yes,
And that receiving it was necessary for salvation. Now, Eucharistic theology is really at the reason that the Eucharist is the heart of Christian worship for Roman Catholics, Orthodox Christians, and the Anglican Communion. not so sure about the other magisterial things like Lutherans and such, but it varies. But that the three largest Christian confessions have the body and blood of Christ at its center in worship. And that Rowling, living in Church Cottage, going next door to the thing, and that she has a blood disorder. And I'm going to push back on the idea she learned this just before Philosopher's Stone. I think that it's really at the heart of that series. That, as I said in my characteristic hyperbole, this book is about blood, not about love. And that the blood quality here, that Rowling would have heard from any one of these itinerant priests, that blood is the logos fabric of reality, and that your means to eternal life and transcending the personal and subjective and ephemeral is by making that blood your own. And that logos identity in your heart is with him, the logos himself. Now that, and your relationship with all these other people as fellow members of the body of Christ is renewed and celebrated in worship through that Eucharistic blood. Now, those of you who have read my books or just heard my story, or I don't know, I just tuned in here for the first time. Here's my revelation that Rowling was writing books of artistry and meaning at no little depth was reading the Ferenczi chapter of Philosopher's Stone, where Ferenczi essentially quotes 1 Corinthians about the uses of unicorn's blood. Now, a unicorn from Tapsi tradition and others is considered to be a symbol of Christ. And when he talks about the unicorn's blood being something that will save your life, no matter how close you are to death, and in fact that it's salvific, but if you drink it unworthily, then you're damned, you're condemned. And that really is the end of the Voldemort story, because we know that he's been drinking unicorn's blood. That's the end of the game. But for a Christian, Orthodox Christian, reading that passage, I was astonished, because I was reading that book the first time only in order to explain to my daughter why we don't read garbage like this. And here is this centaur named for Florence, which is sort of the heart of esoteric Europe, saying, wow, unicorn's blood, this and that, which is, again, straight from 1 Corinthians, St. Paul explaining that if you drink the body of Christ unworthily, then you'll live your life as if you're asleep and you're damned. That literally made me drop the book. I was just like, whoa, this lady is really dealing. And then we get the blood within you that Dumbledore talks about in that final scene. I thought, this is no joke. She is, the mother who died a sacrificial death to save her son, and that protects him from the evil one that wants to take his life. I mean, the Christian symbolism really just bowled me over. And I told my daughter, not only could she read the book the next morning, I told her she had to read it. It was that good. And I was astonished to find out that I shouldn't have been astonished. I had the same objection to Sorcerer's Stone. I mean, it's that sorcery is invocational magic rather than incantational magic, and for Christians, like every revealed tradition, it's taboo. So I was like, oh, this is going to have invocational magic, and I can say we don't do that. Anyway, it turns out that, other Christians had that reflex response and were unaware of that distinction about those types of magic. And they certainly had been blind to everything Rowling was doing with this blood symbolism in the books. I talked about that in the Reading, Writing, Rolling episode. I think that may have been the last Reading, Writing, Rolling that I was in. I'm so glad to hear that Elizabeth Baird Hardy and Beatrice Groves were in it. That's a nice note to leave on, Nick. But
we'll put
was before.
link for that down below as well. Do take a listen to it, and not just because John kindly gives me several shout outs.
Oh, really? You're in there?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Good. That's great. No wonder you remembered it. You selfish. Yeah. All right. That symbolism in Philosopher's Stone is played out through all the books to the very end, really, and the bond of blood, with Petunia and family and such, all of it about the Goblet of Fire is largely a reference to the Eucharistic cup. I mean, there's so much Christian symbolism. In fact, Nick, somebody I know wrote a book about this.
Gotta read that
How
book,
Harry
John.
seriously. Down below, you'll find a link to how Harry cast this spell, because it's such a big deal inside Harry Potter. Now, when you go through the 7 keys to J.K. Rowling, the shed tools, the essential shed tools, one of them is Christian symbolism. Well, Nick, is there a more neglected tool in our conversations about Cormoran Strike than Christian symbolism? I mean, there was a big kerfuffle about the pelican, that Rowling had finally checked the box on the final, animal in the Christian menagerie that was a symbol of Christ. Oh, we got a pelican, we're done, But we don't talk about it that much. And a woman who shall not be named, professor of theology and philosophy at a first-tier American university, has been in communication with me for, I guess, about a year now, hasn't it, Nick?
Yeah.
And she has laid out stuff that makes How Harry Cast His Spell look like just the launch pad for this stuff. I mean, she has observed things and tracked things that I missed in my readings of Harry Potter. And she has not yet given us permission to talk about it. But that conversation has been in the backdrop of all the things that we've been talking about, Nick and I have been talking about, because we know there's a woman who's about to raise that issue again. Why have we not talked about it here, Nick? I think it's because Rowling is really downplaying it. Inside the books, we don't get overt Christian symbolism. We have Strike, who's clearly the protagonist in the story, who's a profound skeptic. We have Robin, who's also not a church goer of any kind, other than the occasional baptism or funeral or wedding.
We have that remarkable scene in Running Grave in the Ale Merton Church.
A lot's been made about the Ale Merton Chapel scene in Running Grave, and you know that I'm not as impressed by that scene as other people are. It is a marker that Strike is not allergic to church, and that he's having a moment there. Certainly, having read a similar chapel scene in I Capture the Castle, where there goes in and simply becomes sensitive to everything inside this place. It's a place of mystery, and it's a place of depth, and a place of meaning. That, though she denies it immediately afterwards, but that experience that the reader has, and she has an enlightenment experience there, where she actually sees a thing of light as she comes out of that room. We have an echo of that in Air Mountain Chapel, but Strike's conversation with the recently reposed Charlotte, either by murder, likely, or suicide, unlikely. These things are all being recorded. When she's a suicide victim, we're gonna just be get these things on a loop. For example, have we mentioned, Nick, that I called the ectopic pregnancy this episode?
I don't think we have.
Well, I only have a little bit left to drink in my glass, so here's to that. Okay. Things we do every episode. Those of you who didn't know that whole unicorn blood story, and have only been following Hogwarts Professor during Cormoran Strike, wouldn't be aware, as people that know me from Harry Potter studies would be, that I don't talk that much about the Christian content inside the series. Now, they also haven't read my thesis, in which I talk about the symbolism of the cross, especially in Troubled Blood, in which the symbols of the cross is emphatically important, because Strike plays the part of the Red Cross Knight to Robin as Una inside the story. And we see crosses everywhere inside that book, to include in the astrological chart. Talbot's True Book is loaded with Christian imagery, etc. Now that Rowling has been downplaying this. It's not nearly as in your face as the Christian symbolism was in Harry Potter when she was a much younger writer. It was much more overt, which is funny because, of course, she was branded as the gateway to the occult and corrupting the youth and all of these things. And she was kind of doing wow, how stupid can you people be? I've got a phoenix in here. I've got a griffin in here. I got, what do you need? What do you need here, folks? I'm really spelling it out. We do get literary alchemy in the Strike novels. We do have psychomachia inside this thing. We have the mythology. We have the chiastic structure. Seriously, Rowling's using all the tools in the shed. Yeah. But the Christian symbolism is really being played down. On top of that, she had that interview where she talked about the beliefs that she has that she's changed. And what's curious about it is well, two of them that I thought were most extraordinary. One is that she's against assisted suicide. Well, one of the big events inside the Harry Potter novels was Dumbledore's assisted suicide. That Rowling has basically said, I wouldn't write that book that way now, or I would color it in such a way to say this is problematic, much more than she did. She's written a whole series about suicide. Suicide is to Rowling what poison is to Agatha Christie. It's just the backdrop to all the murders. We do. When Rowling, the second thing besides this is suicide, the beliefs that she's changed, but she says, I have this God-shaped vacuum within me that I don't know what to do with it. I don't even know what evidence it would take for me to be really convinced, seemingly about God's existence, or maybe about what it means to be involved with an active worship life of that God. But she puts it out there as if to say, I'm a skeptic, I'm an agnostic, I'm, some days I'm an atheist, some days I'm a believer type thing. Well, forgive me, but those things were, unless she's really changed her mind since 2007, 2008, in the interviews that she did after Deathly Hallows, when she talked about, the immortal soul and these things. That and the symbolism in the books, and the fact that Deathly Hallows is largely a story of crisis in faith. That Harry is struggling with his faith in Dumbledore, sort of the white guy in the clouds with a beard, all through the book, and he resolves that thing positively at the finish. He sacrifices himself. He offers himself as, just much like Jack Jones does in Christmas Pig. He offers himself as this sacrifice at the finish of the book. The Christian content of Deathly Hallows, Christmas Pig, Troubled Blood is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And yet, Rowling is doing this game where she puts it off. Now, that I think is important for people, not only people that are doing the golden thread piece here, Nick, about blood, to say, wow, a lot of this is about Rowling saying that blood has this salvific thing. That's why it has the shock value it does when it's just spurting all over the place. It's talk about, that kind of violation is a taboo that she's reanimated. I guess it's characteristic of the genre. Much like if you were reading an English novel, say Dickens or Thackeray or Eliot or any of these things in the 19th century, if someone just threw out the bloody word, it would be whoa, there's a marker. We know exactly who that person is.
Well, they used to censor it, didn't they? So I think in Dickens, I think it's censored. You get B-D.
Okay, all right. Rowling's blood thing is not only her own condition, but that it strikes at the core psychological, spiritual issue that she has in her life, and that her reflection on this blood condition, when it's the core aspect of Eucharistic theology, which is to say, Orthodox Christian worship, but, O, small o or big O there, that Rowling is enough of a reflective person that she's done that. Now, when she came out with that, I don't know what evidence I would need to make this happen. In the last thing we recorded in 2025, I said, what kind of adolescent is that? There's a whole bookshelf of apologetic works for people just like you, and this has all been done. I think Rowling is practicing this direction here. I think we're looking at a series which is largely about Strike's moving from knee-jerk atheist and dismissive of all things spiritual to a person who is growing in his awareness through his love of Robin of this capacity within him. This last book was such a disaster because he was trying to be the loving guy, but it was all selfish. It wasn't anything to do with his logos, which is discerning the truth and being straightforward. We're going to see that shift. But I think the big shift, Nick, is going to be something that I noticed in 2016 on my hour's visit to Denmark Street in London. I was over there for my first visit with my PhD thesis advisor at Swansea in Wales. And on the way to the airport, basically, they gave us, an afternoon to walk through London. I took the tube in and, I don't know what you call that. I took a train in, and walked around Denmark Street. And there's a link down below about that walk. And the most extraordinary thing of that visit was, if you're facing Strike's offices, what is it? I want to say it's number 10 Denmark Street, but that sounds too much like Downing Street. But anyway, if you're facing his premises and you turn around, you realize that the building on that side of the street ends almost directly across from Strike's offices. If Strike looks out his window, Denmark Street ends and takes a turn. It's not Denmark Street anymore. It's a different street. And on that lane, or I'd call it an alley, is one of the most beautiful English churches I've ever seen. It's called St. Giles of the Fields, in the Fields.
St. Giles in the Fields. So it was founded before London had caught up with that area of London. So it was literally a church within the fields, similar to a more famous church, St. Martin in the Fields, off Trafalgar Square.
Now that is that reference to the fields? Is that a plague thing? Was it a burial site?
No. Literally, the fields were agricultural land when the church was built.
Okay, and you sense that because the church is at a different angle than almost all the other buildings. Yeah. This has survived, the Cartesian division of London or whatever. Not that London really works on a grid. Anyway, that church and its beauty is so astonishing. As a visitor, I walked in and there was a quartet, a string quartet, practicing in the not the narthex or the nave, the place where communion is served, and the acoustics in the place were. It was almost otherworldly walking into this church. Again, everything about English church architecture, of which I'm, predisposed to be a great fan. I grew up in the Episcopal Church in the United States, and a lot of, stones and smells and bells in the church I grew up in. It's the fact that Rowling has never mentioned. It's not a small church.
No.
This is it's not an English cathedral. This is not Canterbury or anything, but this is a very large church, and it's an active church, and it's never been mentioned in the Strike novels. Even my dog is waking up to this. He's getting Guido is hey. I think that the blood thing has woken me up to the fact that it runs through everything that Rowling does. And in the first series and in Christmas Pig, it has a heavy Christian content. It really is the answer to all the questions inside the Harry Potter novels comes down to blood. And that is also true of Christmas Pig in terms of the Christian symbolism just rising to the surface, especially at the end, that cathartic ending where he offers himself as a sacrifice for all the unwanted things that have been lost. It would be decidedly uncharacteristic if Rowling's second premiere novel did not have Strike have some kind of need for a place to pray and to feel that impulse. And I'm afraid that means that we're going to see Robin. Only thing I can think of that would take him to a place where he was praying would be for Robin, or in the absence of Robin, Jack and Lucy. And we're Jack is the near death of Jack and is killing the giant. If Jack is responsible for slaying the giant, who is this arrogant, agnostic, secular prig, call me Team Rational. If Jack slays that giant, it will be because Strike breaks down and prays at Saint Giles in the Fields. That building alone, I think, in addition to all this conversation about blood, means that you can't understand Rowling's understanding of blood outside of her experiences as a young woman in the church next to Church Cottage, and all of her reflections on that. I mean, she's a student of Shakespeare and Dickens, and her shed toolbox is taken all from the English Civil War and Reformation forward, which is so heavy in this kind of symbolism and transformation of the people as through the alchemy. I mean, I should say that when anthropologists study colors, there's an anthropologist named Turner who wrote a book about. I'm not going to butcher his title. I'll send it to Nick and I'll put it in the post down below, whatever. But Turner's description of black, white, and red in this Aboriginal tribes symbolism on all their work is that the black thing is earth, the white is semen, and the red, as you'd expect, would be blood, and is that that symbolism in that it doesn't go blood, white, black, white, red the way that the alchemical series does, but that it's still such a rich and powerful meaning, and that the Philosopher's Stone is always described in traditional texts as well as Rowling's work as a blood red stone. And that it has the elixir of life, which is a clear cipher for the Eucharistic blood of Christ. I think Rowling and all the blood that she's talking about, you have to remember, in addition to the very important usage of this in terms of inheritance, the spiritual aspects, which really informs not only the English religious tradition, but the English literary tradition, of which Rowling is, I've argued for 25 years, is an exemplar. From Ferenzi's conversation with Harry on his back to the troubled blood issues, now we have a better reason to understand why Rowling would have given that much thought to blood and inheritance and caste, and it's that the blood would be a go-to reference for her for all of those things, is because I think as a child or a young woman, I would say either pre-menses or right at menarche, she found out that she had a blood issue, and that this informed her life. She had to carry that card with her. She's a card-carrying bleeder, Nick, and that reality, I think, informs in a not in a unconscious way, but informs in a quite deliberate shed fashion all of her work. So there's my first crazy marker, Nick, is we're going to see St. Giles in the Fields, and it's going to be a reference to Strike really coming to terms with his blood issues.
Folks, you heard it here first.
All of you who scoffed at the ectopic pregnancy. Oh, I've got nothing to drink here, Nick. I've got nothing to drink here, right?
So, thank you, John. That was wonderful. So nice to.
This is great to stand on your shoulders. You did all the work. Thank you for
absolute pleasure. I think it's always nice when we can make that nice, clear lake relevance to something that you've been talking about for more than 5 years. Do you think it was a deliberate drop? do you think that Rowling did this consciously because other than John Granger, nobody was getting it, or is it just, it was used in an argument about disease effectively?
Yeah, it would have been hard to stage that.
Yeah.
Maybe she had it in waiting. Like I'm gonna next person that says this to me, you're saying that women who don't ovulate are half women or not women. Uh, that she had that ready to drop that on them. And certainly I don't know if it was Sandy or someone, Tam Spell, someone who's a regular in our comments said, I'm curious that Rowling would have dropped this um, and not thought that we would do this. Well, you're suggesting that she dropped it thinking, hey guys, idiots, all of the golden threads you've talked about, you've missed the most obvious one. And whatever. It is fascinating to me. We've been, especially after the Conrec. I'm wearing my Conrecki shirt too. This is the Conrecki shirt. That especially after the work we've done advancing this Lake and Shed idea as really the hallmark of the next stage in Rowling studies. And really, it's the final stage. It's the critical biography informing the literature and coming to an appreciation of Rowling's artistry. That she doesn't talk to us. There's wonderful gifts she gives to us, usually in Twitter Twitter threads. But if DB Mac is out there, DB, hey DB, Diane, schedule us for we'll send you the 10 questions.
Yeah.
She can go through them. And I know it's not quite as important as getting a Nick apart as a bit player inside the Bronx Studios adaptations of these things, but we'd love that as because we've got 8 days of Christmas left here, so we've got until the 19th. DB, get to work on this stuff. All right, I want everybody to know what Nick and I have been talking about is that I am working on a free 5-class exposition about Lake and Shed things to really bring people up to speed to that, so they don't have to go through the entire Lake and Shed experience in the Conrecki 31 episodes. And that 5 thing is going to solve 3 essential problems that people that are serious about understanding Rowling need help with if they're really going to get the full experience. And that will lead into a much larger class that you'll be learning. It won't be free, but it'll be a much longer thing. And that's my commitment, is to really put down a easily accessible and state of the current knowledge about how to read Rowling and get what she's doing. So and the fact that all my physical belongings are in a pod next to my new home.
So first priority is creating a home, John, for yourself and your family. That's number one.
God willing, our next podcast will be in my new home in South Carolina. We're in the Highlands of South Carolina. For those of you who want to, we're just outside Anderson, South Carolina, if you want to find us on a map. Thank you again for everyone for their patience with me, and especially the subscribers. You should know that the move would not have been possible except for the paid subscribers whose contributions have paid a significant portion of that, much more than the gas money for crossing the country. And thank you for that. Nick, again, all of this is down to you and the work that you did putting this together. And thank you again for the editing. And I'm going to bounce past this post to you. I hope you'll put together something.
Of course I will. Of course I will. Guys, for what I miss, if we say we're going to put a link down, I don't put a link down, let me know in the comments. I will make it up for you and put a link in the comments. But I'll try and put this together. John, I'm sure I join every one of our listeners and watchers and commentators in that we are rooting for you to get
just
yourself.
Wish me a Merry Christmas, Nick.
Of course. Merry Christmas, John.
What was so
And
funny was the last like 10 days of the Philippian fast before Nativity, we couldn't get the person to agree to the lease thing. I had to go through all these automated things, and it was just going on and on. And I turned to Mary after about a week of that and said, "This is not going to be resolved until Nativity." And sure enough, on 25 December or 7 January Gregorian, um, everything was, all the obstacles just went up in smoke, and everything has been, hunky dory since then. I was like, okay, here we are. Merry Christmas to everyone, and thank you all. I look forward to, this is going to be an exciting year. It's going to be a really exciting year.
So we will all speak and see you all again very soon. Take care all.